Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. On the podcast today, we have Jeanelle Dech. Jeanelle is president and co-founder of Adaptive Textiles, a textile printing company in Westchester, Pennsylvania. She's known for her fit-like-a-glove slipcovers, speed sewing method, and workroom profitability training. And she's the creative force behind the Workroom Channel and the Curtains and Soft Furnishings resource library. Jeanelle and I met 10 years ago as part of the WCAA, the Window Covering Association of America, and we've worked together on many initiatives over these last years. We've also been accountability partners, and for those of you who know us both, it has been a crazy ride with all kinds of creative thinking and ideas thrown in. This interview was fun, and even Winston, her dog, chimes in a few times. What I love about Jeanelle, among other things, is that she is always willing to dive into a subject, think about it, talk about it, turn it upside down, and whether we agree or disagree, she always has a heart to explore and to understand different viewpoints. Today, we hit the topics of ideal client, our why, marriage counseling, and teamwork. Welcome to a glimpse into our friendship. Enjoy. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Jeanelle, I'm so excited that you're with us today.
Hi, Michelle. I'm thrilled to be here as well.
Excellent. So what I'd love to do is have you start off and just share a little bit about your businesses. You have more than one. Just I've read a little bit of your bio, so they've heard that, but I want them to hear it from you. You know, really just a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Sure. Actually, before we jump into that, I want to share with you how excited I am about your podcast and also compliment you on the way you're doing your introductions and the fact that you've got this recognizable sound and intro, not just the one that you do specific for each podcast, but then the one that kind of draws us in with some familiarity. I've been a fan of podcasts lately on many different topics, not just business, and I am loving yours.
I really appreciate that. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about that because I think it's...
About the intro?
Yeah. So so you know me because we're accountability partners. We're going to talk about that later in the podcast. And you know I'm a planner and a processor because we've also, owned a managing company together. And so I was really planning out every part of the podcast, and I wrote an introduction, and I hired a voiceover artist to do it for me. And when it came back, her voice was beautiful, but the introduction sounded like I was on a game show. It was, and now, welcome to Profit is a Choice. It was just horrible. And I went back to her 2 or 3 times and kept, can you tone this down? Can you change this? Anyway, I paid her, moved on, and I thought, I can't use it. I cannot use that. Mm-hmm. And so I hired a second voiceover artist and shared the first one and said, please don't make it sound like that. Please just make it sound normal. It was horrible again. I swear it was like they just kept I'm from the South. We can stretch out words.
Right, you've got to draw.
We're stretching out words, right? They made me look like I'm talking really quickly. Anyway, I just kept thinking, how we always talk about being authentic and being real. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, that's just not me. It's terrible. It could be commercialized, but it wasn't me. And I thought, what am I going to do? And it was funny. One of my good friends and my son, they were all like, well, why don't you just do it yourself? And I was like, well, okay.
Of course.
And so, right. But you're thinking kind of commercial anyway.
Right.
I stepped back.
Had you checked in with me, I would have said, Michelle, do it yourself. Yeah. Right. And the reason is because, your voice and your Southern draw and the clarity of it and the volume of it and the way you enunciate your words has always been one of your gifts. And it would have been a shame to not be the one to do the intro, because that's such a strength of yours. And so, yay, I could have told you that. You could have saved a lot of money.
Clearly.
If we had just checked in before you started this whole thing.
Yeah. And then I went out and I bought the music and of course did all that. And then I had to rewrite the intro to say it for myself, right? First person. But anyway, I appreciate you saying that. And now everybody, if they can learn from my lesson, be authentic. I think it comes across so much better than a purchased, trying to be something that it's not. It just didn't need that.
Unless that's not your thing.
Right. It was just not my thing.
It just, the voice is your thing. And so putting that front and center is good. And I can't imagine anyone who actually produces a podcast where the voice isn't their thing. So
right.
That is kind of interesting. Well, anyway, off the beaten path, I just wanted to make sure you got that compliment. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. So you asked about my businesses. So I own Adaptive Textiles, which is we say custom printing business in Westchester, Pennsylvania. But really, what Adaptive Textiles has evolved to become is a fulfillment center for textile collections, private textile collections. So we do on-demand printing so that inventory can be kept low. And we also provide warehousing and product finishing services. We have an on-site workroom so we can actually finish the products of these textile collections so that the collections can be sold either through trade showrooms or directly to retail clients through the textile designers' websites and through many other channels. So we basically provide the fulfillment services for private textile collections. That's in a nutshell. And Adaptive Textiles is an umbrella to a few other ventures, as we recognized the ability to support the rest of the industry through some other activities. So, for example, Adaptive Textiles owns the Workroom Channel and also the Workroom Marketplace. Both serve small workrooms in fabrication training and business training, and the Workroom Marketplace in the selling of particular workroom supplies that are often unique and time-saving for that industry. And then lastly, not under the umbrella of Adaptive Textiles, but a standalone, is the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, which I founded about a year ago in order to maintain the archives of educational resources in the custom sewing industry. So that's it. And those are the current businesses I've got going. There's like a constant what's next for me. So, but that's what's on my plate right now.
I am a supporter of all of your businesses. That doesn't mean I'm a textile designer. I support you and support your businesses. You know that.
Yes.
Did you start each of those with the idea of immediate profitability, midterm profitability, the long game, or how did you think about that?
Okay, well, we'll take the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library just kind of off the table now, because that was started as its own LLC.
Sure.
Because I questioned whether it could be a profitable venture. So I started it with eyes wide open that I was interested in preserving this content, but that there may or may not be any financial reward for that effort. And so the reason why I did it as an LLC and not underneath the Adaptive Textiles umbrella is because I wanted to have the ability to convert it to a nonprofit or be merged with a nonprofit or sell it to a nonprofit.
Right.
It was a matter of set up the company quick so I could quickly preserve this information that was at risk, and then I'll figure it out.
Right. Kind of keep it flexible.
As time goes on, right. As time goes on, I've got the flexibility. It's a single member LLC. I've got complete control. It's whatever it becomes, it becomes. So I'll pull that off the table. And to answer the question with that, no, there wasn't any. There was no intent. It was a big unknown, and I knew I just wanted to preserve it.
So I think the profitability for that company, so I think we actually did really answer it, was not gauged necessarily in money. It was gauged in preservation of very, what do I want to say? Very important information that actually was kind of like an underpinning of an industry.
Yes, exactly. And so, yes, I wasn't looking at financial profitability, but it certainly was part of my why.
Sure.
It's always part of my why to preserve and protect. Right. And so it answered my why, and I have no idea. And I still am completely kind of up in the air as far as what, not completely up in the air. Things are presenting themselves that might turn that into something bigger than it is now.
Got it.
Financial profitability, not kind of in my mind at the start of it.
It wasn't the primary factor.
No, it was not at all. In fact, I was pretty sure it wasn't going to be.
Right. And I remember us having that conversation. It was a longer term strategy for sure on that particular purchase. What about with Adaptive?
Now, with Adaptive was started while I also was the owner and manager of Crabapple Interiors. So Crabapple Interiors was a retail window treatment focused business with an on-site drapery workroom. So we essentially had the manufacturing business within the retail design business. And we had a retail showroom and by appointment. So very much like many of your listeners, actually, with the interior design focus. Now, I mentioned that because that was the springboard for Adaptive Textiles. Adaptive Textiles launched because within Crabapple Interiors, I noticed this need for custom fabric. And also I had ideas about how the workroom could be more efficient if we were printing engineered designs. And that desire to do that for Crabapple Interiors led to Adaptive Textiles. Adaptive Textiles evolved from the understanding that if Crabapple Interiors had that want and desire, then likely every other business like Crabapple Interiors might benefit from having custom printed fabric available to them. So this was in 2004 when Adaptive Textiles was formed. And did we have profitability in mind? Absolutely. There was no question. I'd already learned, some very critical business lessons with Crabapple Interiors. And with Adaptive Textiles, it was not going to be possible to start it gradually because it involved a hugely significant equipment purchase.
Right.
Yeah. And so
you can't get a portion of a printer to get started.
Right. I mean, we could have started it by contracting out the printing to another company, but they didn't exist, at least not within a price range that would have made sense to resell it. And so all of that kind of unknown area and new technology was just becoming known. And when we started Adaptive Textiles, the only way to do that was we couldn't justify it as bringing a printer into Crabapple Interiors. Our volume would not have, in any stretch of the imagination, paid for the cost of the equipment to bring it in and all the learning curve and the whole thing. So with Adaptive Textiles, it's absolutely necessary to look at it as a startup technology business almost, and we found investors. So then, of course, profitability has to be part of the equation right off the bat because you have to forecast, and the investors want to know what kind of expectation they might have for gain.
Right. They definitely want to have their conversation coming up, right?
Yeah. So it was started extremely mindfully. I had a financial coach and learned how to do that forecasting and honed the skills on writing a business plan, which I'd started to develop with the other business, and then had to do the hard work of then presenting it to potential people who might fund the business.
Wow. That was definitely a look at profitability from the
beginning. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there was no way, especially with investors, that, you had your own little mini Shark Tank before Shark Tank came out.
Exactly. I think that's why I'm such a fan of the show, is of Shark Tank itself, is because of that's exactly what it was. I mean, even to the point of actually presenting the business plan in front of a group of old men,
sitting around a table,
right, who would make the decision whether to give us the seed money for the equipment.
You know what's so interesting to me is there's been a big shift. It's almost funny to think about not having the ability to print on demand. It just seems so natural today. There are so many companies that offer some type, maybe not just like yours, but they offer some type of print on demand service. But back in 2004, it truly was a novel idea.
Absolutely. It was so novel. We talk about it now that we were on, instead, they say you talk about being on the cutting edge of technology. We call it the bleeding edge.
Right.
Because, I mean, we were the only ones of the 5 U.S. businesses who purchased the DuPont equipment that got us going. We were the only ones who survived. It was a very difficult ramp up. and this industry was the last to adopt. The apparel industry adopted the technology much more quickly.
So Jeanelle, I also know you, like we mentioned earlier, we've been accountability partners. We've been partners in business. We've been friends for quite a long time. And for those of us that know you and love you, you really, one of your big words in your why or your values is excitement, right? You like that thrill, and you like taking risks and being inventive. I know that energizes you. Can you tell me a little bit about how that has led you towards profitability and away from profitability, or how it drives your business?
Yeah, I think it's just like any other trait. There's the good and the bad, right, that comes with it. And so that kind of need for excitement and the need for, a certain level of risk in it that makes something exciting. Certainly it leads to profitability, because the bigger the risk, the bigger the gain, right? And that's certainly what we've experienced at Adaptive Textiles. Not during the recession, of course, but certainly 15 years later. I am grateful for that aspect of my personality, and I'm starting to reap the rewards of the big risk that my husband and I took on, 15 years ago.
Right.
And so I think just in general, the trajectory of Adaptive Textiles is where that risk has paid off. But, how has that trait led away from profitability? Well, I can't even tell you all the number of ventures that didn't get beyond the first couple months. There's
right.
There's a constant, oh, that's a good idea, let's try that. And which can be a complete distraction to a real focused goal. I'm trying to think of specific examples. There are a lot of examples even before Crabapple Interiors began. Like, I had a soft toy company for a month, and I thought it was going to be a costume designer. There's all sorts of different paths.
I think some of that's part of the creative brain, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly don't think I'm unique in this. It's just that it's such I've recognized that it brings such joy to me that it's sometimes not even worthwhile doing unless there's some risk involved. It's boring to me. Yeah.
2 thoughts on that. One, I got an email today. I'm on a different email list, and the question that it asked is your next big idea killing you? And the thought behind it was, if you're constantly doing something and trying to put it together and you keep jumping to the next idea, you're never truly taking care of the one idea that could grow. Right? So we almost need to have not saying one idea, but we need to find something kind of like your adaptive that you can literally pour into so that over 5, 10, 15 years, you can reap the benefit. Because if we're jump all the time with the next new idea, no matter how great and how grand, we're never really nurturing one. And it made me stop, because I know I am constantly, my top strength is maximizer. And I have ideas that have ideas, right? My ideas have babies. They're all the time. It's like gremlins that you feed after midnight. They're just all the time. And then really trying to make a decision on which ones do I act on and which ones do I act on now.
Exactly. Yeah. Which ones get pushed till later and or let's simmer for a while.
Right. Or which ones do I push off to other people and go, you know what? I think
that's your idea.
Yeah, I think you might be better at this than I am. And I'm just going to give you this idea and you can trash it or you can run with it. But I'm going to take it off my plate because I think you might be better equipped or in a better position to run with it.
The size that Adaptive Textiles is now, so we've got 15 employees and growing. I have to say that the size we are now kind of inherently provides a bit of restraint on my part to not just go after every harebrained idea because 15 people are relying on me to keep the company moving in a positive direction. So I have to say that some of the discipline that I've developed over the years, which some may say is very little, but I think it has to do with the responsibility that I feel to not only the investors, right, who stand to financially benefit if I can keep this train on course, right, but more so me, the responsibility to the employees that make these decisions of whether or not to go after the next big idea. It slows down the process, and I'm much more, what should I say? I slow down the process and really kind of consider the risks and the benefits more carefully than I would have before we started Adaptive Textiles.
I also think, at least from the outside looking in, there is an inherent risk in just running a company with 15 people versus 1 or 2. So there is some of that risk and excitement honestly kind of built in intrinsically in the size of business you have. So maybe where in the past you would have looked for that in a more external way because the businesses were small. Now it's almost like it literally is presenting because 1 or 2 bad things.
Challenges are exciting.
Yes.
Because there's the risk involved in even just the littlest daily things.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. And which is probably why I kind of have this calm about me these days, that I don't think it's just because I'm getting old and tired. I think it's because that risk-taking drive is being satisfied with the daily activities.
Right.
And rather than it needing to be some other big new venture.
Right. You know, I almost think about it too. Like, I remember my son and your son getting us on that horribly big roller coaster at Carowinds that I used to be.
Well, we should set that one up. So what was that? Our sons were helping. We were partners in managing the CHF Academy through the recession. And our sons came to help us so that we could actually have family time and work.
They were 12 and 13 years old.
And their reward for their hard work was the trip to Carowinds at the end of the week.
Right.
So there we are.
And they got us on this humongous, like the biggest, it was the brand new roller coaster. It was really big. And it is a good thing that I had not looked at a picture of what it was going to be. Right. Yep. But what's so interesting is it struck me when I was a young girl, I lived near Carowinds and we went 2 or 3 times a summer and I was on every one of those roller coasters. I could have just ridden those almost all day long. And, you know, I've gone through adulthood and yeah, I do think some of it is age, but I didn't need that thrill. There are enough thrills in trying to raise humans and trying to get a meal on the table. At the end of the day, that was enough of an adventure for me. at that particular point, I didn't need an external high on
Yes.
a roller coaster. And so I use that as an analogy because I think that's what happens when we have a mature business is there's enough risk just in maintaining it, let alone continuing to grow it, because sometimes the growth, the more mature the company, is not as extreme as it was at the beginning.
Yeah, and I also look at like the overall sales, like the gross sales of the company, and then I can put these new risks in perspective to that. And as the company grows and grows and grows, by 30, 50, sometimes even 60% each year, then the cost of these smaller risks to try this new product or offer this new service or whatever, it's done internally, but it's a smaller piece of the whole pie. And that just, it feels so good right now to have a decision that would have been a big risk in the past be a smaller risk now, just in proportion to what is to the trend of what is going on with the company.
Yeah. With that said, too, what do you think the biggest lesson you've learned in business has been? I mean, you've owned multiple businesses and still do, right? What do you think the biggest lesson has been for you?
I think the business is business. Like, and what I mean by that, and I know you've said this before too, what I mean by that is that if I go back to my biggest mistakes or biggest misunderstandings about business, I'd have to relate it to the maybe the 5th and 6th year of Crabapple Interiors, and understanding that in my mind, I knew window treatments, I knew the workroom, I knew fabrication. And I thought that how could somebody else be able to advise me on how this business could grow if they know nothing about window treatments and soft furnishings?
Right.
And it wasn't until I started working with a financial advisor there, with that I realized it doesn't matter whether it's window treatments or apples or, I don't know, give me something else, another product. It just is business. And that I've got something to learn by people who are strong in any other industry in business. And so I think that, the biggest lesson to date is that it doesn't matter what the product is. Good business advice, good business practices are good business practices. And that's it.
What would you say were the top 2 or 3 good business practices that that maybe you learned from that time that you now try to employ in all of your companies?
Well, we have a hiring philosophy that I think is something that kind of is across the board. I try to employ now every time. And that's just that hire, well, 2 parts of it. Hire slow, fire fast.
Right.
Which I forget what book that came from. And then also hire character and train skill. So those have to be lessons, learned the hard way when you don't do it that way. Then also, as it relates to bringing on staff, that the higher character, train skill, and the higher slow, fire fast are huge for me. I used to tend to get really excited and project characteristics on new employees and probably pay them too much off the bat and make promises of what this could be and all that. It was all honest. It was all what I thought would happen. But now I'm a little more reserved in an understanding of really trying to understand what the fit could be and not making promises of what the job is or even that they've got a position until, a trial period of working in the company. And then the fire fast thing is when it's not working, it's not working. It doesn't do anyone any good.
To keep waiting.
to just keep waiting, is your fear of, here's another one then. It kind of relates to that. We have a philosophy of we don't create a policy because of an inability to directly address one employee's problem.
Ooh.
And there's probably a better way to say that would be a catchier motto, right? But every time we have the leaders of the company get together and they're talking about, the different areas that they manage and we're solving problems, oftentimes they'll come up with, well, I think we need a policy that there's, that we shouldn't, no cell phones in the bathroom, for example. And we always ask ourselves, we have to ask ourselves, are we creating a policy, a flat out across the board policy, because I'm afraid to have a direct conversation with the person who we're annoyed with who's doing that?
Very good. Very good.
And oftentimes, if you answer that question, it usually is a fear of having the direct conversation and dealing with the specific issue, because nobody wants to be called out, and it's difficult.
Right.
Right.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And if you're non-confrontational, so for the managers of the different areas, many of them, are don't have the. I mean, I don't have problem with confrontation, so it's easier for me to have those conversations. But for them, it's such a, you think about it all night long, and then you prepare yourself for how they might respond, and it gets really difficult. And that one piece of advice, and I don't even remember how it evolved, except for I remember a particularly poor manager that I worked with when I was teaching, who would, I was teaching high school, who would always come up with these new rules, and they'd be company-wide rules, or we'd be working with DuPont, with their printing system, and be in their place and see just kind of this overwhelming structure, corporate structure, and all these policies. And we're a small business. We don't have to be that.
Right.
I own the business. I can run it however I want. And you know what? I am not going to create a policy and make everyone suffer because I'm not strong enough to say to the one person, hey, it's not cool. Do not take your cell phone in the bathroom. You're spending entirely too much time not working.
Right.
Boom. I'm not going to put a sign on the door and make everybody else not do it because you can't be reasonable.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great question to ask. And I think it's true in a lot of areas of business, primarily in the management piece, right?
Yeah.
Why would we create a restrictive environment that didn't need to be restrictive simply because we wouldn't have one conversation or be willing to follow through on a conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, as far as biggest lessons, most of my biggest lessons have to do with managing employees, because it's part of my why to employ and provide opportunities for people. And so it's the constant battle of striking the balance between a really productive work environment and also one that is thoroughly enjoyable, because that's part of my why. So my lessons, most of my lessons kind of relate to that. My memorable lessons anyway.
Right. Sure. So
yeah.
What is your why?
So first of all, let me back up and say that I need to give you great credit for helping me define it. You and I have taught together on many occasions, and I think each time I have this new thing that, I think this is part of my why, right?
Right.
So my why has evolved over a number of years, but really I should say I don't think it's really evolved. I think I'm just discovering it. It's probably always there in the same way. It's just that it took a while for me to dig it, have it discovered in me.
Right.
But mine is 4-part, and it's love of textiles. It's 3 or 4 parts. Love of textiles, the thrill of uncertainty and risk, and lastly, the thrill of the build or the creativity. And with that is not only just building things, beautiful products, but it's also building teams. I love the build of a community. I love the build of a team. I love the collaborative efforts and all of those things that have humans locking arms and moving in the same direction.
I think what's so exciting and interesting too, I mean, I know you and I started working on, I found the whole why discussion all the way back in 2013 and 14, which is when we started talking about it. And
with the book, with Simon Sinek's book,
yeah.
Is that when it was published?
I don't know, but I remember writing down my why originally from Jack Canfield's book.
Oh, I don't even know that.
Yep, in his book. And then I wrote it down back in 2008, 9. And then I refound it or found it again, however you say that. When I was reading Simon's book, I thought, oh, I've written something down. And when I went back, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
And so
that's how you know you really have it.
That's how I knew. I was like, well, I'll put that away for 5 years. And that was through CHF, the sale of CHF, and on the other side. And it was exactly the same answer. And I was like, okay, I want to look into that. I got to dig into this now because this is something that had not been top of mind, but it clearly had been in my heart and a driver for me the entire time. And so I remember when you and I had that discussion. And then I've had it, of course, with plenty of people. I've helped 2 people just this week and some last week really dig into their why. And when you go through that, it's almost like the light bulbs start going off and you start thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I can see this throughout, a good portion of my life and my decision making and my choices, that this why, whether I knew it and intended it or not, is showing up.
Yeah.
Have you found the same thing to be true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Except for I mean, I don't think I was intentional about it until you and I started talking about it and watching the. I don't think I even read the Simon Sinek book all the way through. I think I just watched his TED Talk.
I don't know that I know for sure that I was not intentional about it until I discovered it the second time through Simon's podcast.
And I like to look at the themes that arise, as you're doing the work and discovering it. I look back at, what are the themes that have been throughout my life? What has been of his interest since I was a kid. And I think that's a real helpful way to get there. And I think being like truly honest with yourself and understanding yourself. And that takes a lot of work for people.
That is not an easy process. I mean,
you're right.
To me, the most difficult part of that process is to find time to be quiet and be still, where I'm not thinking about the to-do list in front of me, like where I can kind of block out and really sit and think, and creating the space to do that. And I will say, after really kind of going back and refining the why that I had defined earlier, I have mine, written and in a company notebook, if you will. And when opportunities come my way, I stop and go back to it and ask myself, is it an alignment for me? I know you and I went through a similar situation where you had an opportunity a few years ago, and asking yourself, is this an alignment for me? And does this feel right for me? And then, kind of using that to trust, because it has been being, if you will, in air quotes, it's been being worked out for a while in you. Right. Exactly.
And I remember that moment. I remember being so grateful that some of the why and documenting your why, what had just become a part of my awareness. When that opportunity came up, I remember saying to myself, man, I would be so good at this. This is a good fit for my personality. I would be awesome at it. I'd probably be the best one to do this for you. This person who was offering me this, whatever it was. I don't want to go into the detail, but
opportunity.
Offering this opportunity. I remember thinking, I am the best one for you for this, but it doesn't fit in my why.
Right.
It didn't fit in my mind. And in fact, it would take me away from it.
It would take you away from it. The best part of defining it, writing it down, even if it's messy and not articulated beautifully, just getting the ideas down is what matters.
Right. Mine is a wheel with 4 spokes.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. A good visual representation.
Yeah, I like the visual, right? And I spin it.
Right.
And then it's like, ooh, which part of my why am I looking at today?
But I think by writing it, it makes it able to stand up on its own.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You've got to make it, for me, making it, writing it puts dimension to it.
Yes.
Right. It cements it in some way.
And then when I remember, I mean, I've had a couple of opportunities to say that doesn't fit my why, similar to yours. And I'm just going to say, for me, there's been a great big piece. I didn't war with myself. Should I, shouldn't I have? It's just like, I'm sorry, we are not in alignment here. I think that there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, but it does not get me closer to like my idea of where I want to go or what I want to be or what I want to, the impact that I want to make in the world.
Exactly.
And I can be at peace and just say, we're probably not a good fit and you might want to find somebody else. Whereas before, without even giving that any thought, it's almost like I felt myself at times grasping at ideas or grasping at straws or always wondering, is this the next thing I should be doing? Is this right to do? And it's not a right or wrong. It's what's best for me in this moment. And
exactly. Yeah. And I think that the beauty of the why conversation is that it kind of can take the short-term and long-term variable out of it. Or maybe that's not it. Maybe it puts the long-term variable in.
I think it puts both short and long.
It just considers both because it's at the core. Like I was thinking, profitability is not part of my why. Profitability is, how can I say this? Profitability for me is a way to, it's like the tool. It's the resource that I can use to serve my why. But it's not my why. Profitability is not
financial profitability.
Financial profitability,
right,
is not my why. And it is, however, financial profitability, the goal of the business, and the business serves my why.
Right. I look at your business and I would say profitability very much is at the top of it, but it's the profitability of community, of building, of those interactions that you described. But financial profitability is, and let's be honest, financial profitability is the natural outcome to making a big difference. Not always, but in this particular case, for example, you said, talking about just financial profitability, meaning the company has to make money so that you can keep doing what you're doing. So if you're doing it well with efficiency.
Right. So that I can create more jobs so we
That's
can,
right.
So we can touch the textiles,
Right.
which I love, so that we can build a team, so that we can have
exactly.
And so that we can continue in the,
right.
In having some uncertainty and trying new things.
Right. And my point is, if you ran the business terribly, if you hired all the wrong people, if you took risks that were not substantiated, the natural outcome of that in most cases would not be financial profitability. So you couldn't continue. That's the vein in which I'm looking at it in this particular moment. Not saying that everything has to be profitable to be worth something. It's got to be profitable in some way.
Business, if we take it back to the definition of business, the goal of business is to make money. There's that if I were to kind of get back to the previous question of what is one of the biggest lessons to date, business is about making money, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's my why. My why is not to make money. My why is to do all those other things. And I'm choosing to use the business, and the money the business makes is allowing me to serve my why.
And see, I would say that's the same for most people.
Yeah.
Right. Because my why never mentions money.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
But I think people get confused with the separation of the why of their business and the why of their being.
Yes and no. So I think that the business why is always going to be a subset of the human why that started the business, or should be some version of it, right?
Yeah.
But I think what happens is, because making money is not necessarily our individual why, we project that onto the business.
Yeah.
Make an excuse.
Make an excuse. You're right.
Right.
That's
we kind of project onto the business, well, my why is not to make money, it's to serve and to be beautiful design and beautiful window treatments and beautiful this and beautiful that. I want to serve people and love people and give a pretty space. And all that is fine and all that is well.
Right. But if you're using that as an excuse for the business not to be as
not
profitable
charging
as it could be.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's feeding something else in them. And I think it goes back to what you said. We can do all that. We can do it as a nonprofit, not make any money. We can do it as a charity and not make any money. But the minute we move into calling this use of our resources a business, the outcome should be to be profitable.
Well, yeah. And
for what we're talking about
to
today.
Make money. Right.
Yeah. We've got to make money to keep doing it. If not, somebody's paying for it. Right. And so we just can't project that. If money's not part of our why, we can't project that and go, well, it doesn't need to, business doesn't have to make any money.
Exactly.
Because that only works for the first couple of years. And then I can tell you that's what makes my phone ring. I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years. I'm not making any money. And now I don't feel passionate about it anymore.
Oh, right. Because it kills. Right. If it's not sustainable, it just kills. It just kills all the other. And that's an interesting conversation. I have to tell you that, lately, I have been, I don't know if it's because I'm over 50 now or whatever, but I've been very curious about human needs in general and, like outside of business.
Right.
And relationships. I don't know if it's because I'm an empty nester now. And so my husband and I have had to kind of revisit what we mean to each other. Right? In this new season of our lives. Basically my mind was blown recently with what I've been studying about neurobiology and psychology in relationship to primary relationships like husband wife or a mother daughter or things like that. And this concept of profitability is kind of kicked in. Let me try and explain this. The biggest aha moment I've had this year has to do with personal, intimate relationships, primary relationships with husband and spouse, and how you got to stop keeping score, right? So that for a primary relationship to thrive, the scorekeeping needs to be removed from the equation, and instead you're making a commitment that I want to get to know you as well as I possibly can and know how you function so that we can support each other unconditionally, right? And this concept of keeping score, which is so tied to profitability, is out of the equation. And it's all about what you are providing to this third thing, the relationship, that is outside of the two of you. I share this just because I think that in going through this process and understanding the meaning of that most important relationship in my life right now, I've realized that everything that I've come to know about business and profitability and that sort of thing, and the need to kind of check in and keep score, is opposite to what I need to do for this love relationship to thrive.
You know what it's making
me... What do you think about that?
Yes. Well, I'm a big cheerleader for the love languages.
Yes. And great book.
Right. And for the idea that, two should become one. I think I mentioned that to you. And so thinking about it as pouring in, instead, again, not keeping score with the other person, but literally taking the bullet for them, pouring into them. How can you build up, edify the other person instead of here's what you didn't do, here's what you didn't do.
Exactly.
Right. So I usually teach all the time, you always find what you're looking for. Always. So if you were looking for that person to disappoint you, they're going to disappoint you. If you're looking for them to impress you, they're going to impress you because you'll keep looking until you find it. Right. And so, but my thought not that I totally agree with what you were saying. Here's what I thought though. What if at work, the most important relationship was the idea of the team?
Mm-hmm.
And so that it was almost a separate entity from each individual person.
Oh, yeah.
And each individual person in that small team environment workplace was pouring in to make the team better, as opposed to keeping score of who screwed up last.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just thinking about that same concept, and could it be picked up and moved over, and what might it mean? And, even for me, I think when I have my metrics, I'm a metrics gal and I'm looking at profitability, what I teach, but not at the expense of being kind and being generous and being a good person. And so I know that when I do my reviews, I'm looking at more than just the number, right? Because that doesn't tell the whole story of my year, of my month, of my week. That's
right. It's a short term. The numbers are a short term.
Correct.
Thing.
And so what is the bigger picture here? What is it that I'm really striving to do? And I think that kind of goes back to, what you just shared is, I love that. I would really like to dig in to see how that could work out in a team environment.
I think that's kind of that's where my head is these days, and trying to apply the psychology of couples therapy essentially into the workplace. And
because you're trying to build strong relationships, which then make everybody, even just a profitable work environment, right? It's a much better work environment.
Just like business is business, the big learning of past years, relationships are relationships. And kind of this idea of safety in a relationship is really interesting to me, especially after the summer I just went through. It's just this idea of, I will never leave. How that basically, I'm saying things that are directly a result of one particular book and a particular TED Talk. So I might as well draw attention to that. Well, not just one, many, but in particular, Stan Tatkin, Tatkin, as a psychologist and neuroscientist who wrote a book called, I think I even have it here, Wired for Love. And so a lot of this thinking that I've been doing lately is again couples therapy, but I think it's got this great impact it can have on the relationships in business.
I'll add that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things in it, which is the exploration I'm into right now, is this idea of I will never leave. If what he's saying is true, Stan Tatkin is true, the concept of I will never leave provides safety in the relationship, which opens up all sorts of wonderful energy. When you feel safe, then all of these things, other things blossom. And I felt myself this summer, as we were working through the empty nest syndrome and what we are to each other afterwards, I felt myself blossom in a way that freed up all sorts of energy that I could then put into my why, right? And it really changed me. And part of this, what I'm grappling with, is this idea of, if it takes a I will never leave and a stop keeping score attitude, is that possible with employees? Because can you really create a situation where you're saying that you will never leave when, basically you could have poor performance and want to let someone go?
Right. So again, back to Simon Sinek. He had a talk out that I saw on Facebook the other day, and he was saying that people never leave bad companies. They leave bad managers. Because if you have a really bad company, but that manager is awesome to you and protects you and takes care of you and makes it safe, people will stay. It could also be an excellent company, but if the manager is just stinky and backbiting and doesn't make you feel safe and cared for, people will leave. It's not about the company. It's about the relationship with the manager. You should go look that up.
I could look. Yeah, I will. So I could actually approach this as, yes, I can have an I will never leave attitude and expect that to be reciprocated, right?
Right.
But that's really me personally supporting the other person. It's not that the company,
Right.
This isn't the company saying that.
Right. It's the manager.
Right.
It was just the minute I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh. And so I started talking to my husband about it, who works in corporate. And we were just going, yeah, you will hang with a bad company for a while.
Yeah.
If the manager is, your direct report is really doing the things that you need to do to feel safe and cared for.
Right.
In
Right.
that particular environment. Yeah.
Meet your basic human needs. Yeah. I don't think we certainly don't have it worked out in this one conversation. And even as the words came out of my mouth, the "I will never leave" thing, I don't know. I mean, that can't, like,
right. I don't know that we can make that promise in the workplace.
Yeah, right. How can you make that promise in the workplace?
However,
and I don't think I want my employees to make that promise, because, like, for instance, Yasmin, who is training to be a nurse, in 2 years when she finishes her schooling, she will be leaving.
Yes. But I think it's more of a mindset. And I think that it's just the opening of the conversation. Like I'll go back when my parents, started their careers. You started with a company, you ended with a company. And I remember when I came into the workplace in the 80s, people were moving every couple of years. And Simon even uses the example in a different talk, that was when companies started trying to balance their books by doing big layoffs at the end of the year. And then they turn around and rehire or consult with them.
I know, how horrible.
Back again.
Yep.
So they changed the landscape of the safety between the company, the manager, and the employee. They disrupted it.
They sure
did.
And
because it's so broken, now we're seeing this, I'm going to get you before you get me mentality. And
right.
It doesn't matter. I can go somewhere else. And so we're not seeing this commitment to each other to kind of see something through, which I think is really what you're saying.
That's so detrimental to a team functioning.
Yes. Yes. And so I just love that we've even started opening up that part of the conversation, because there are many designers and workrooms who have teams, who have businesses. And as well as I do, we're out here all the time and we hear these conversations of difficulty hiring, difficulty keeping them, all those same troubles that we have no matter the industry. And so what if we did start looking at these as relationships that we were building for long term, not with necessarily the same commitment we would espouse, but what if it was a commitment? I'm here to help you grow. I'm here to help you for what you don't understand. I'm here to pour into you. And then what if that employee literally said back to that company, the manager, I want to learn. I'm here even if you get it wrong. Right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. It's just, wow. I love that. I'm jazzed. I think this is
it's a great concept.
Is 2019. This is my 2019 it's to really kind of dive in and look at the couples therapy as it could potentially benefit building a team within a business.
I love that. So I'll say that's probably one of your next profit goals.
There you go.
Profitability of the team, right? And of the relationship.
The building that relationship with and perhaps, like, how is that different in ways, or in what ways is it the same?
Right.
Wow. Yeah. So anyway, one of your prompting questions was, like, what are you doing to put yourself in a position like to be successful and profitable for the future? And I'll share that we are super excited because our team is moving to a building next door with 2.5 times the space we have now. So we'll have about 15,000 square feet. And
wow.
four loading docks and an expanded workroom and a place to bring in 2 more print. We've got 2 printers now, inkjet printers, and we're bringing in 2 more, plus some more equipment. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing to basically we're riding a wave of the growth of our clients who individually, many of the clients we have are the same ones that we had when we started Adaptive Textiles, or at least 4 or 5 years in. And we are supporting their success by expanding physically. And then my big goal is, what do you call them? Those big, hairy, audacious goals?
Yeah, BHAG.
BHAGs is to have 50 employees by 2025 with working happily within a business that is thriving.
Oh, I love that. I know that you can do it.
So I put it out there.
Well, you're close. You're
Put
close.
it out there to the world. We got 15 now. Yeah.
That's right. Now you said it. We're going to hold you accountable for that.
Okay. Well, you do that, my accountability partner. Yep. Can I ask you what yours are?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I don't know that I've thought of it. I don't want what you are wanting.
No,
Which
no,
is right.
It's right. Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Your why is not my why.
My big goals are literally to shake up the industry. And when I say industry, I mean interior design, workroom, creative
dollars.
Yep.
Yeah, all the whole mix. Yep.
I want to shake them up this way. The very first thing I want to do is I want them to feel valuable and worthy in and of themselves, period.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Just because they were born. That's it. If I can get that, my next step for them is to help them feel confidence and to work towards confidence, because I believe that, I did a keynote on this last year, but I believe that confidence is a combination of knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know, and knowing other people who can support and help you. So the team around you, right? Confidence doesn't mean we have to know it all. We know what we know where our limitations are, and we know how to get help.
Yeah.
So if I can then...
Yeah, you actually have to be... what's the Brene Brown?
Vulnerable.
You actually have to have some vulnerability in order to reach out for help.
Yes.
So it's funny how to have confidence, you've actually got to have vulnerability.
Right. And most people don't want that vulnerability part.
Yeah. I mean, that's the scary part. Right.
The other thing that I'll say that works into that is one of the so I just worked with another coach we were doing some strengths finder work. And he said one of the biggest indicators of great leaders is self-awareness.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you have to know, right?
Yeah.
So that is so for me, and all of this is my why. So the very first part of it is that they recognize that they're valuable and they're worthy because they're here. The second is that they gain confidence in what they do and what they have to offer the world. And then the third for me is that if they choose to make it a business, that they make it profitable so that they can continue doing their why. That's it. And my goal is to disrupt the industry. That's it. It's to make a way.
In a positive way.
In a good way. In a good way. But when I say
Hurricane Michelle coming through.
Well, it might be a hurricane, but in a good way.
Michelle, right.
Bringing love and sprinkles.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. But to me, we have, I guess because I see it day after day after day after day, almost to the point that if I internalized it, I could almost weep for some of these people every day. It's that sad to me, and it's sad to them, and there's a better way. And I think we've gotten so used as a culture to buying quick off the internet, and that we don't know what to do with services similar to what we provide in our industry. And so, whatever that model is that each individual person builds, that they build off their strengths and their why and their confidence and their abilities, I want to help them make it the best that it can be. And so it's kind of hard to quantify that, but if I could change the industry so that when people go into it, they know how to set it up from the beginning or how to pivot when it's not right, I would say my work was done. I need to find a way to quantify that, though.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like your work is done when you're not needed.
That's it. I'm going to work my way out of a job.
Yep, there you go. But, that'll never happen because there's
I should give myself 10 years for that.
Right. You always have people entering the industry and there's a learning curve, right? So yeah, it might just be I
may just have to live forever, Jeanelle.
Yeah. Hey, no, here's the metric. The metric is as your coaching clients become newer and newer to the industry, then did you see what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That might be an indicator that it's not a lot of misstep and recovery. It's more let's set this up
at the beginning.
Yeah.
Set
this up from the beginning and reap the benefits of the mistakes that all of us have made before you.
And that I've made myself, which is what I built the business off of.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So that'd be an interesting metric to follow in your own coaching.
Yeah. I like that. What do you wish that you had known when you started Adaptive that you know now?
When I started Adaptive?
Mm-hmm. You already knew the lessons from Crabapple, but what do you wish you knew?
Here's one, and this is pretty specific, so it's not a sweeping generalization, but when we started Adaptive, we thought our customers were going to be interior designers and window treatment manufacturers. And had I known, instead of having 4 or 5 years figuring out that those were not necessarily our clients, that our clients, the better fit client, was maybe they're an interior designer, but what they really are is somebody who wants to develop a textile collection.
Not a one-off?
Not a one-off custom, but somebody wants to build a collection, then we actually could really be a good fit and support them.
Very good. So maybe then if I could boil that down to make it a little more sweeping, you wish you had known a little bit more about your ideal client, who your ideal client really was.
Yeah. Right. And, here's the thing.
But that's okay.
Right. Here's the thing. I don't know if there was any way we could have known.
Right.
And I, so I'm not going to beat myself up about it. And it doesn't turn into sweeping advice, really.
I know.
But I guess the advice that comes from that is question that frequently. So rather than waiting years and then discovering because something's not working or you're not profitable, then doing the work of questioning who is your client, right? Mm-hmm. Who is your target client? If you question that early, let's positively, the sweeping advice would be, and this applies interior design or across business, right? If you question who is your target customer early and frequently, you have then the ability to change course quickly and frequently.
I totally agree. I have that for the businesses that I coach. We do it at a minimum yearly.
Yeah.
Part of our review. Mm-hmm. And if we see the business starting to shift, we do it mid-year or quarterly as we watch the shifts happen.
Right, right. Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
Very good.
Because that is what took us a long time to figure out Adaptive, and a great cost. And again, I don't know if we could have shortened that period up, but boy, it would have been great if we could have.
That's true for all of us, right? When we look back on those things and however, those are sometimes the things that lead us to where we are now that we might not have gotten to without them.
Exactly. So no regrets here.
I hear you.
But that would be a piece of advice I could share.
So Jeanelle, tell everybody where they can find you. I'll have it in the show notes, but you tell us where they can find you.
Okay, so the best email to have to reach me is Jeanelle at JeanelleDech.com. So JeanelleDech.com. And the reason why I give that email and not Jeanelle at CSFPro.com or Jeanelle at AdaptiveTextiles.com or any other number of emails I have is because I think I'll probably keep Jeanelle at JeanelleDech.com regardless of what businesses I buy and sell.
Love it.
So there you go. That's how you can reach me. If you are a workroom or a window treatment manufacturer or seller of any type, if you check out the Workroom Channel on YouTube, you might find some interesting things that would benefit you there. We also have workroommarketplace.com for supplies. And if you are an interior designer who has interest, aptitude, and a dream of building your own textile collection, then Adaptive Textiles might be a good fit for you. And, the only way to find that out is to reach out and ask.
That sounds good. Jeanelle, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Michelle. It was a pleasure. I felt like we had our accountability check-in today.
Exactly. We did. Yeah. Given that you turned the questions on me and refused to answer them, it felt like a normal conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And again, I apologize for my dear Winston's excitement over it all.
That's okay. I'm happy to see that you love him. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as Jeanelle and I actually enjoyed recording it. If you are looking to plan for a profitable year for next year, I invite you to go to my website, scarletthreadconsulting.com, and to download the Financial Health Check. It is a free downloadable document that will help you determine where you need to focus for profitability in your company. Again, you can find that at scarletthreadconsulting.com.